Now then, cricket features strongly in today's sports schedule. England's men are in Antigua seeking a win to level their one-day series against the West Indies, while England's women are there in Mumbai to play the first of 3 T20 matches against India to be followed before Christmas by a 4-day test. I've been speaking to Nat Sima-Brunt, congratulating her first on the recent renewal of her central contract.
I'm so lucky the 10 years ago to get one of the first central contracts, and at that point I was out of uni. I sort of was in love with cricket, wanting to do that for as long as I could, but being okay with it not being such a big money-making career. But fast forward 10 years, it's come such a long way, and it's just so crazy to think how far it has come and how lucky and privileged we are. Being awarded the contract and being awarded 4 match fees as well, certainly something.
Well, I was just going to say that. I mean, it does look as if things are certainly improving for women in cricket, and maybe you might say even for women in sport generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the last few years, women's sport has been at the forefront of some really big moments, and yeah, obviously we've been part of a couple as a women's cricket team. Yeah, the Lionesses have been pretty special. The Red Roses as well had such a great World Cup campaign. It feels like women's sport has really been followed and got behind by the public, which is really special.
Listening to in the India series now, it's for the kind of early preparation before the T20 World Cup, which takes place in Bangladesh in September and October of next year. I suppose it's fair to say that this now is where the serious business begins in terms of preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. The conditions here have always been tough,
Hi.
and in these conditions is really, I guess, an important thing for our team. The eyes are on the World Cup coming up in Bangladesh, and then shortly after that is the World Cup out here in India in the following year. So yeah, we've had pretty busy.
Final question for you. You would be aware that England have won the T20 World Cup once. That was back in 2009. I would suggest to you, Tom, in things overdue, isn't it?
It does seem like quite a long time really. We've still got quite a bit to go before that competition, but with the players that we have and I guess the time that we have to hone our skills, I'm really excited about our chances, and yeah, hopefully from now until the next pass we can put in some good work and get the right time in terms of our skill.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
And so much for today. Liverpool 245 today.
Welcome to Berlin, the centre of the 2023 weekend.
Relax to sports for our democratic future with a look at the future of security. What can we do to prevent ourselves from careening into anything, one direction to turn in the other? The 2023 week lectures continue. Now from Berlin.
Berlin story for us is about a wall. That wall came down.
In 3, here on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. That was to prevent evils. To the weather. Right, sails lifted this afternoon and increasing wind from the west wind reaching Northern Ireland, Wales and the past Scotland.
You're listening to today on Radio 4.
Boris Johnson has arrived at the COVID inquiry in central London, where he's expected to admit that government made mistakes handling the coronavirus, but also to argue that its decisions ultimately saved lives. The former Prime Minister is set to defend his record over 2 days of hearings. The Home Office Minister, Chris Phillips, says draft legislation to replace policy with the central mandate will be put before Parliament within 4 weeks.
Gahan'ın o bir.
Jerry, thank you. Turning now to Sheffield. Joshua, what then is the strategy of the Israeli military? Is there anything they can point to say, look, maybe horrific what's happening in Gaza, but it's working?
I think they have made pretty good progress in Gaza City in the north, although even there about a third of that city is understood to be not entirely in their control. I think what they would say is that the strategic targets of this campaign, the leadership of Hamas, the top three men, Khaled Deif, the head of Hamas's military unit, Qasem Days, is number two, Marwan Issa, and their leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, Hezbollah, that they are probably in or around the southern city of Khan Yunis, and that the Israeli military is increasingly putting that place under pressure. So they would say that that's the focus. More broadly, I'd say it's a pretty mixed result. They have killed, by their own very approximate, and I stress it's very approximate estimate, somewhere in the region of 5,000 Hamas fighters, but that's out of an estimated total of around 30,000. So this is not a war in which you're going to win by killing your way out of it, body by body. It's a war, I think, the Israelis can only win in their own estimation, that is, by decapitating Hamas and rendering it militarily incapable of threatening Israel and making it impossible to run Gaza.
Part of that is dealing with the tunnels, isn't it, Sheffield, which is to make sure they can't be used again to hold hostages or indeed to hold weapons that are then used to attack Israel. Are they in the process of dealing with those tunnels of being talked about flooding them? Is that really practical?
I think they are close to dealing with some of these. So far, Israeli officials say that they have discovered around 800 tunnel shafts and that they have destroyed 500 of those. That's a very substantial number when I compare it to the proportion of tunnels destroyed in the last major war in 2014, Operation Protective Edge. Water, I will say, is a pretty mixed way of destroying them. It tends not to destroy tunnels. You can flush people out, but often it doesn't collapse the walls or the roof. Usually you have to use some kind of explosives to really durably get into that tunnel. So on the tunnels, I'd say some successes, but also quite a long way to go, given that we know this network stretches for many hundreds of kilometres in Gaza.
So rather brief, if you wouldn't mind, last thought from you. What are the Israelis you're speaking to in the military saying to the answer that other people offer, to the question other people often put, isn't the cost too high, and isn't the consequence of that cost that more recruits to terrorism?
I think the Israelis recognise they don't have the months of time that they say they need because of the pressure, and I think that this campaign is going to slow down, and into next year it will be more like air raids that are really exhausting practices. Joshi, the voice of what they're doing there. 1869 is the time. A year ago, Michelle came to Twinton's Musgrove Park Hospital and found there were simply some distress. Ambulances queuing for patients they couldn't offload. People on trolleys in the corridors of the entire hospital under huge strain. Good news is that this year is getting built in part because COVID is further in with the era, but as well because of things that the hospital has done, things that other hospitals around the country want to copy.
I'm Dr. James Gagg. I'm the Associate Medical Director for Medicine at Musgrove Park Hospital, and I'm a consultant in the emergency department.
And where we're standing, people will hear vehicles in the background, and in front of us 2 ambulances, and we're at the part of A&E where we covered before from ambulance.
That's correct. So this is where all our acute patients come through the door. We've got 2 ambulances, of whom they've already offloaded on arrival, and there's been a story in recent days and weeks where we've had good flow through the department into the hospital, preventing people having to wait outside.
What has changed?
It's a very different winter for us. Last year, about 5-6% of the patients coming through our department waited over 12 hours to get a bed in the hospital. This weekend, only 1 patient waited over 12 hours.
Are you confident that the differences that you've seen now, that the new way of working that you've got, will actually mean that even when the winter really gets going, assuming it does really get going, you still won't see queues here, that the situation will be really markedly different from how it was last year?
All the indications are it's going that way. There are certainly going to be times of significant pressure as we go through this winter, but we are at a deeper point into winter than we were last year, in a very good position.
Okay, let's go inside. Tell us where we're going next.
So we've just come through the doors that our patients on ambulance trolleys come through. We're just walking into the main corridor that takes us to the central hub of emergency department.
This is the corridor, I think, where you talked to Michelle, and Michelle talked to patients who are waiting on trolleys here. There are no trolleys. Shelley's initiative, I'd be waiting, boy, we don't know how long we'll be waiting, and the longer you leave it, the harder it is to cross the train, get back to normal. Shelley, what you're doing is not only putting people through faster, which is good for them and good for the hospital, it's also actually medically the right thing to do.
The evidence is very clear that we should be trying to close ileostomies in this situation within about the first 3 months. We also know, unfortunately, that because these patients don't have cancer anymore, a lot of them did initially, and that's why they've got the ileostomy, they aren't and can't be prioritised over patients that do have cancer to have their surgery done in the inpatient setting. So this is our way of trying to battle that problem, really.
Tell us about the day. It was pretty routine. Came into this building here, and I think probably by mid-morning, I think Shelley and her team were ready. Wheeled into the theatre, probably made a couple poor jokes, then they shut me up by knocking me out. Then I woke up, and I'm fine. A few checks, and I was home. I had to sort of do a double check that they'd done anything. When you look at the surgery that you do now, Shelley, when you look at the people coming in and out now, how much further can you go?
I think we can go a lot further, actually. There's an operation called a right hemicolectomy, which is cancer surgery for people that have cancers in the right side of their colon. And I think probably early in the new year, I'm going to start offering a very similar pathway to this for those. The possibilities are enormous.
We're back now with Dr. Mike Walburn, who is Medical Director, not just for this place, Mike, but for actually for the whole site. So I want to ask you finally a kind of question about the overview of what the difference is that all of the things we've just been talking about have made to this hospital and could make to others.
Our relentless focus on prioritising patients who've been waiting for surgery for a very long time through the pandemic, and seeking ways to decompress the hospital of other emergency patients in order to make some space for the patients who are waiting for planned care. Today we have, I think, 113 patients in the hospital who don't have a medical reason to be in the hospital, who are waiting for some sort of social care placement. But that problem is not going away for me as medical director.
The view from Musgrove Park Hospital here in the heart of Somerset, I should say, you were hearing all those views before the announcement of
the dates of the next junior doctors' strikes were announced, and we did hear live on the programme earlier from the head of the NHS in Somerset that would have the effect of putting up the waiting lists again. Now, we learnt earlier in the week that RIS is the word of the year according to Oxford University Press. Not the only example of Generation Z slang we might have missed. Some of it means well of something, the person is well of something, especially if they leave their thumbs. If someone's mother, their iconic female figure, it's a nice one, that, isn't it? And if you're in the mother era, well, you're absolutely slaying. Let's talk to Susie Dent, next o'clock, for example, and Dr. Christian Ilgrave as well, who's lecturer in social linguistics at Edinburgh University. Morning to you both. Susie Dent, first of all, RIS as a word.
Yes.
It's not just that it's new and that people are using it, it's a surprise to those who don't use it. It's the speed, isn't it, that it takes over?
Things are taking fractions of time these days to spread and really, embed themselves in the language compared with a few decades ago. And that's a really good thing. I think the acceleration of change is sometimes quite frightening to people who feel that it's somehow dumbing down our language, etc. But actually, it's incredibly exciting is creating these wonderful, not entirely new terms, because obviously charisma might come from charisma, so it's a riff on an existing word, but it really took off and saw a huge spike in usage on our graphs.
And a plus for the language, Dr. Ilgrave?
Yeah, I mean, as a sociolinguist, I believe that language change is a good thing. It enriches diversity. It shows that young people are using language in ways that are different to older people, right? And that is what is a youth identity, right? Young people sound like young people because they use language that is different from an older generation.
And the point that Susie Dent was making, Dr. Irving, they've always done it. But it's just the speed of it and the salience, I suppose, of it now.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the really positive things about TikTok is it shows us language change. It shows us how young people are using language. So generations who wouldn't have seen this language used before now, are aware that people are using words like riz and mother and slay and may, etc. So I think, yeah, it's definitely a positive thing.
We of course please balance to have someone on because this is all great, but we can't do that. We need to write the next best thing, which is Nick, who's here in London. I was just thinking if we could add the word riz to most of our keys of favourite, it's not in the age of what?
It's definitely generational, isn't it? And that, again, that's not a bad thing. I mean, culture as those people from the 20th century really started to use this one. That's its whole point. It's supposed to be a unifying linguistic identity that other people, particularly grown-ups, just don't understand. And the moment we say it, it has to be one of them.
Susie, is that we're starting to use it. So if I said, Nick, you're this today, that's fine.
Unfortunately, I think it's the one adjective approval that everybody can use, no matter what the generation is coming, which has been around since the 19th century actually. When I used it the other day, and my teenage kids looked at me, and I knew that was it, it's over.
I don't know what the reaction is.
say?
Yes, social signals. I was thinking about another word on the shortlist actually, which was Swiftie. A very big fan of Taylor Swift. And that's really interesting because Swifties, the fans, they have their own currency in terms of Taylor Swift lyrics. They speak to each other in lyrics, which becomes this sort of, as I say, this lyric currency for them. So obviously very useful, and again an identity marker. But Riz it can be a key sign of success. It's being used in lots of different ways. You can Riz up, you can have unspoken Riz. It's being used in different parts of speech. People talking about Riz-coloured glasses, where on dating sites people are prioritising Riz over other characteristics. So that is a key sign that actually a word is here to stay, at least for a while.
Susie then, and Dr. Christian Gilbert.
I think you slayed it, Justin. I do. But I don't know the difference between that and 8. Did you 80s or something? It is now Chester. It's 9 o'clock. When an Italian woman emerged from a cave 70 metres below the Earth's surface, where she'd been for 500 days, she said rather annoyed to have her solitude interrupted in contemplation of the finished her book. Well, a new study says there's real value in being alone but not lonely, so we ask you to tell us about the place you like to enjoy solitude. Rachel got in touch, said she walks up Ladston Walk near Halifax every morning at 5:30 and loved being here in the liminal hours between light and dark. It's guided me through difficult times and given me a sense of place and a knowledge of who I am. Mark, also from Yorkshire, goes to visit the woodland in the city. Loves the smells and the sounds and the silence. The magnificence of trees, fungi, insects as well.
I went to a Quaker school, so I didn't have any option but to go through solitude there and silence, and I've always really enjoyed it. I just wonder whether our listeners enjoy the solitude as much as they enjoy listening to the radio, and what that does to us, Nick.
Well, very good question, because Peter got in touch and says he spends most of his time alone with one companion of radio, of course, a friend in the corner. If you want to tell us more of your solitude places, 0330 1234 346 today at BCJ.co.uk.
That's it. Dan McAdam, Jack Evans, our editors. Bye-bye. BBC News next 9 o'clock. Boris Johnson will face questions about his handling of the pandemic of COVID-19 this morning. Officials and ministers who served the former Prime Minister have already given evidence, some attacking and others defending Mr Johnson's approach. He's expected to admit that his government made mistakes, but he'll also argue that its decisions saved lives. Ministers say draft legislation to accompany the new asylum treaty the UK has signed with Rwanda will be published within days. The BBC understands that there is significant disquiet among moderate Conservative MPs that the government will seek to override the UK's human rights obligations. The Home Office Minister Chris Philp was asked on Today if that was about to happen.
We're in the process of preparing a bill that will ensure the issues raised in the Supreme Court are comprehensively addressed, to make this legally watertight, to make sure that the sovereign will of Parliament is our full sovereign, gets implemented and doesn't get unpicked by the courts. And the bill will do whatever is necessary to achieve that end. I'm not going to speculate about the individual components of that. They'll be announced fairly shortly.
Medics in southern Gaza have warned the health system there has been completely overwhelmed by casualties since fighting restarted between Israel and Hamas.
I know that beautiful, I shall be trying that one. You'll also see preparing some more traditional staples like a pavlova, a smoked salmon. How do you come up with new twists?
Well, it's quite easy because there are sort of newer ingredients. I mean, there's a huge fashion at the moment for kale. I do put a bit of kale in, but I really love cabbage. You make a pointed cabbage, absolutely delicious. And there are all sorts of things that become popular, and we try to include them.
I know that you don't just want these recipes to be for the festive period. Why is that important to you? Not just the Christmas day, but really all year round.
It's to extend one of the favourites. One of my real favourites is the Highland beef pie. And it's got plenty here. There's still many butchers there, and you buy, accordingly, you buy a certain cut for a roast, and something like shin and beef needs long, slow cooking. It's more reasonable, and it makes a wonderful pie, and with lots of celery and garlic, a good slugs of red wine. average Christmas bonus was £1,800. Turkey came in at £64. The other food at around 120. What do you make of the rising cost of Christmas?
I think it's very sad. It makes me comfortable and joyful because it's so easy, not so expensive to serve over the Christmas period. And something like occasionally you could have a pie, which is what I did for America. It's just not expensive. It could be great in the home or fish pie, I think, and just it's a little bit of a recipe of a very expensive ingredient in it. You can always cut down on a fish pie with a bit less fishy, and if you've got hard-boiled eggs in, put more hard-boiled eggs. Decrease the amount of meat and put a few more vegetables, but always put first. Family occasionally think, can I do the things? They're easy thing up.
I do like very encouraging ambition, Mary. I want to talk about your Christmas. The smells of Christmas. You're always centred around the food holiday. What's the smell that reminds you most of Christmas?
To be honest, actually, I was just about to pick up last night. My neighbours and that wonderful old one. It is immediately tastes to it's Christmas.
Society today choose not to of our issues. We don't fit into mainstream society and often treated as oddities. And I'm saying, no, there's many oddities, it's just that we're honest about them. We can't hide things.
Well, I'm glad you did, and your story and what I understand about it is very powerful. Richard, I want to learn more about you. You were a very independent person. What impact did losing your hearing and eyesight have on you?
They were quite different, Cooper, because losing my sight was something I knew was happening very progressively, and I anticipated it and, in a sense, planned for it to some degree, and adjusted to it over time, whereas my hearing declined really quite rapidly, entirely unexpected, and I had learned to rely on my hearing to compensate for not seeing. So that was a much more, that's a painful process. And what more I say? Yes, people say, well, it's got to be done. I prefer to do that. Really nice.
And that's been the most disempowering thing.
It has really, yeah. I can't take part in conversations, I can't get people to say hello. I don't know whether they're listening to me because of mumble and sound.
Lena, it's interesting that Richard said he was anticipating the loss of his sight. But I wonder for you, what went through your head when Richard started to lose his hearing as well as his sight?
The first panic and dread, and the oh my god, this is really happening. And it was a bit of a joke in our early life, that in my married life, that I've lost my sight and I've got excellent hearing, and that's fine. Contact will change on some level, but it's absolute terror, because I just thought, how on earth are we going to function? And loss. So panic, trying to keep going and to make things work. There's still a few
Even used the word angry, as well. That's very honest of you.
Yes, because you don't realise the loss until it's really gone. So that was very much about my powerlessness. I couldn't make this better. I couldn't make a difference. I was such a loss. There is nothing better because once it's gone, it's gone. And that's a very broken place to be. And anger was my protest. But it's not useful. You can be something, but in my case, no, because there was no way I could make this evident to Richard, and ultimately the novelist.
It's interesting that both used the word lonely. You had each other.
It's lonely, it's the rest of the world.
Lena, at marriage, we talk about being with one another, standing by one another's side in sickness and in health. What has that come to mean for you?
I think for me, it's about being honest with myself of where am I in this relationship now, and be respectful to Richard, to say this to standing by each other literally has meant digging into the deeper, darker areas of relating, including the hurt, the mutual anger, the mutual frustration, and walking alongside the suffering. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, I can't
hard to make it better, but what I can do is alleviate some of the loneliness and suffering by being a companion in that suffering. And that to me is standing by, and including my wedding vows, which were about sickness and health, and my goodness, but I have been tested, and I'm glad that I have gone to those dark places, and I will continue. It's progressive loss, but I have to stand, and the bigger reason to be with you is I love you. You're in those dark places. You're understandably concerned about Richard. What about you? Who do you turn to in those dark places? Well, that's been fascinating, Queen, because we were part of big circles as well. We've been part of various groups of friends, and the testing out of those early days of who was going to be with us and be with us in this suffering. And I quickly began to realise that there are friends and there are those who are befrienders and will walk with us. So who is there for me? I can have one and who have what I call the stamina, the ones who love to be because they can't understand it. So I was trying to live with it, but be prepared to listen, not having to look for solutions, but there are many. And at the end of the day, I have to dig deep within myself. And the early hours of the morning of the test, when I'm wondering, will I find a way through this in this panic? And I have, and will continue to do so. And therapy has helped, really helped.
I was going to say, I'm glad you've had some support, but in those early hours, when you're lying awake looking at the ceiling, thoughts going through your mind, do you turn to prayer? Do you turn to, what's your routine to kind of shake it up and crack on with caring for Richard and being there for him?
Big things is about self-care. So the self-care about you said something important there about shaking up movement. Movement is one of the greatest antidotes to when you freeze, and that's the panic. Because literally when you think, when I'm feeling powerless, I freeze. So to move, to swim, to exercise, to get out into the world as a sighted person, because I'm not non-sighted like Richard, I still have my faculties, and making sure those needs are still met. And I have choices. So my yoga practice, my writing, my gardening, civic salvation for us both. Because we've enabled all our working to grow and to see growth through plants and to feel that and to enjoy that. Absolutely.
So you both garden together, and that's your happy place.
It's quite an element that I enjoy because if I can create an environment where I'm not disabled to that, but so the greenhouse is my scene, because things are within reach whenever they are.
Extraordinary hope felt most powerfully among the struggling millions of black South Africans, like Cynthia Ntebe, living in desperate conditions in a squatter camp outside Johannesburg.
I feel very safe. You can see yourself, I haven't got a place to sleep. I also sleep with the small children outside there. Because I'm suffering. I'm suffering because I'm blessed.
Cynthia Ntebe and her children lived under a piece of plastic sheeting held up with sticks. It was cold that morning we first met, July, the southern winter. The wood smoke from people's morning cooking blending with the fog of coal fires from the nearby township of Tembisa. Every morning, Cynthia would bury her shelter in the ground to prevent it being bulldozed by the local authorities. Like millions of black South Africans, she was judged to be squatting on somebody else's land. Cynthia eked out a living by scavenging on a rubbish dump for tins, any scrap metal she could find. It was unhealthy work, and she earned a pittance.
We are suffering because we are black people. It must change. The future must change. We want to be the same like white people. We must be the same.
By then, July 1993, constitutional negotiations were underway between the main political groups. There was a conviction that democratic elections were coming. Cynthia was among the millions hoping these would bring a better life, a home, jobs, education, healthcare, and peace. It was a hope encouraged by the man expected to lead the new South Africa.
Well, my got the cliff.
Your Royal Highness.
That same year, in December, Nelson Mandela gave a famous speech as he collected the Nobel Peace Prize, jointly with F.W. de Klerk, South Africa's last white president.
The common humanity that forms both black and white into one human race will have said to each one of us that we shall all live like the children of paradise.
It gives us the title for this series, in which we'll go in search of some of the people I met 30 years ago to ask whether Mandela's promise has been realized in their lives. I'm travelling with my former BBC colleague and dear friend Milton Nkosi. We reported South Africa's transition together. We witnessed not just the end of white rule in Africa, but a journey away from the degradation of the human spirit towards a shared humanity. As I remember when I saw Milton's mother, Bridget, and a friend of hers, Simon Captain, vote for the first time back in April 1994.
I just feel I'm in another world. I feel this can be true. I feel this is true. I feel for Mandela's sake, I've just done it. And I'm happy.
This day is a great day. On this day, I became a human being. I became a citizen.
20 years ago, Milton and I are returning to the township of Tembisa between Johannesburg and Pretoria, near where we first met Cynthia and Tebe. We knew some of the family were still living here.
We're calling her, yeah? Okay, to get directions. Okay.
We're looking for Cynthia's daughter Doris in a place that's among the worst in South Africa for violent crime, including murder and rape. A poll of residents found more than 80% regarded it as a very dangerous place. Fortunately, it's not too long before we spot Doris, whom I first met when she was a young teenager.
How are you?
How are you? Let me ask you first. All of you. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
Doris leads us across a patch of waste ground, over scraps of plastics and sparkling glass. Two men lie against a wall, smoking, observing. Then down along a street of typical box-shaped township houses, until we reach a square pink building. A sign in big letters says Creative Party Place.
Take my shop. My survive shop. I'm tired.
It's here we get our first news of her mother, Cynthia. She became ill with diabetes and now lives in a quiet little rural area. In order to have time to visit and care for her mum regularly, Doris left her 9-to-5 job at a local mall and set up her own shop selling party drinks. In her life there has been a positive change. From a child accompanying Cynthia to adulthood, first getting a job and now opening a small shop. It all seemed a long way from burying their plastic shack in the ground 30 years before.
In the put to hide the plastics. At night, we have to
That was because the local authorities, knocked them down.
Yeah. And our shop is at the General Base.
You were shot?
Yeah, as well. Shop Rubber Village here. We used to stay there by force, remember? That's what happened. So when they came, I was trying to run as well. I was trying to protect my young brother. You know, they come in and then come us, and then I was shot. Yeah. Here.
Right, just to do it.
Yeah, here, on the side.
Doris's children went to school and are doing well, but the bigger picture in Tembisa isn't so happy. More than 30% of the population is unemployed. Power cuts, so-called load shedding, disrupt business and personal lives every day. The essential infrastructure allowed to run down or sabotaged, by one estimate losing around £47 million a month. The failure of services would come back again and again in conversations on our journey.
Well, life in South Africa, when I look at life, it's a war. You have to start life. It's not easy.
just a block away, outside the clinic, was really lots of squalor and rubbish and running sewage on the road. Just tell us what it is to live here. What are the problems here?
Yeah, the electricity. 2 years I didn't have electricity. 2 years I was using the cement stove there. I was using like public stove.
Looking at this, they have paraffin oil.
Public stove, like yes. And then I got that light from
It's a solar plant.
yes.
Why didn't you have electricity for 2 years?
Because they say this woman about to do.
Yeah, or because there are people who steal electricity from the grid. So they have what they call illegal connection. So their phone is Innova. Innova is a snake. So the government in its drive to stop illegal said you must catch this snake. So from African that causing the electricity for decent people that we have.
Yes, yes. Other people.
The other big thing we read about all the time is the corruption, giving away the money to government. So you have no services or very poor services. There have been big protests here about services.
Corruption is too much. Look at our streets. There is a gravel all over. There's no municipality. There's no paved. This place has been here for a long time. Not paved. There's no street lights. I'm telling you, this place is not a nice place to live. It's not at all. To live like this.
Doris works hard to help support her own children and her extended family. Amid the multiple challenges of life in Tembisa, there's still a powerful emphasis on the bonds of family, a safe harbour when the state is failing. I remember Amos as a youngster. Now he's in his early 40s, helping his sister Doris with her new shop. The story of his life journey is like that of so many young Black South Africans. Along the road, the unemployment rate is now over 60%. Do you have family?
Well, I used to have a family who had been going away since so let me have like 5 years. So they left me to wait to Mpumalanga.
Okay, so that's out east.
Yeah. So and that because I couldn't even afford to maintain it. And, I also got 2 children. Just need to over the phone. Something what I can do, especially something that was really like it's a friend. Just for them to buy some stone.
You send money to the family.
Yes.
And do you ever get to see them?
It's been 1 year ever since I've seen them because to get there it's very expensive.
Oh, yeah. And what about your kids? Are they at school?
They're school. The other one is 16, the other one is 17.
They're still at school.
Yeah, still.
Do you think that they will be able to have a better chance?
Yeah, I just want to try more since I would like to enjoy that kind of job, not to become like me, because it's been my time to myself, but I couldn't. So I don't want that to become the same as I want to go further with my life, and all things can reach more bright future one day.
30 years ago, the ANC was unchallenged. It's very different now, and that's because of corruption, massive issue on the doorsteps, failure to deliver services, failure to deliver employment. The most radical voice is that of the EAF, the Economic and Freedoms Workers. They've come on with a very populist agenda, targeting what they say is white control of the economy. One of them managed to be set. We're on the way to get their perspective. The local EFF rally was viral in the news, but this encounter will surprise me. The woman in front of us was known that EFF, but a storm of personal crisis. See about your camouflage talk with the EFF, economic freedom in our lifetime crisis.
That gets very to the family. What do you think is the answer to the problems of intimacy? So our problems here are around perhaps the youth, because even if they have parents who don't get the necessary support, did you vote for back in 1994 in the first election?
Yes, sir.
Do you have family? Do you have children yourself? What age is your child?
To be honest, my child, age of 15 years, she's smoking first time. Even now I'm talking, she's pregnant. I don't know where she is.
So that one is why you want to fight the drought.
Yeah, even though they are there,
Yes, she is living in one place, and where she lives, but I can't tell what consistent is. I have been looking at what you're supposed to come and help me to get my daughter out of the situation. I'm left to fight it alone. As a long-term ANC activist, representative of this township, do you feel ashamed of the corruption that your party has resulted in?
I was going to feel ashamed if that was one of the things. There is no way where the ANC is out there. There's individuals who put in the organization and the tendency is unfortunately some of them along the way they went resort to very bad things. And I felt that happened. No, I'm not. Of course I'm not. Because a lot of people on the street judge us on races. Hence, we are taking very radical measures in our institutions. I'm not let's check post the elections list. Because South Africans are a very understanding society. Just because you have to be arrogant, humble yourself, talk to them, address their concerns, and
Politicians have said that you have to take an
patience.
Exactly.
I met Cynthia Stimple at this business school in Johannesburg. In 2016, she lost her job as a controller of South African Airways after raising the alarm about a crooked deal with performance agreements.
All I still get is scared to fix. What's disappointing was that when you look back now, you say,
Cynthia is now executive director of an organisation called Whistleblower Council, which has supported over 160 whistleblowers in the last year. You should have all of this sentence. All of it. The job that you had. What were you doing?
when it was one third meaning, that to me means everything. Every country has its problems. And what we see in our country, what we see in the short space of time, is that it was like a cancer, and everybody needed to also grab and take. And this, where they have 20 cars and many mansions all over the country and globally, in Russia, South Africa, we live all over the place at one time. So you can never enjoy it. They literally come and use a strong word, great. That's how I feel about corruption.
Having lost her job, when Cynthia sent out her impressive CV, she was shunned by prospective employers. Nobody, it seemed, wanted to upset the politically powerful by hiring her. But whistleblowing in South Africa can have far more deadly consequences.
All 6 accused men in the murder of whistleblower Babita Deokaran have pleaded guilty to the 2021 murder.
In apartheid times, the killers of whistleblowers and dissidents were usually white security police. Now, they can be hitmen hired by powerful figures with links to the ruling party and organised crime. Yet, still, people like Cynthia Stimple continue to fight.
During the time of me having been suspended, I was followed for a full month and a bit. And there's been 3 break-ins in my home. So yes, I drive very cautiously, and if I see anything strange or not following me, I bypass my home, I bypass my daughter's home, so that I don't, so I'm just very vigilant and very
Have you thought of leaving?
No. My husband is German, by the way.
So you could.
I could, and I have a German residence permit. I could go live here anytime. But I feel my purpose right now is here. I need to leave a legacy for my grandchildren. I need to leave a legacy for my children. If I don't, then who's going to do it?
You're nervous. Driving down the well-paved road in north of Pretoria in a place called Abomane, one of the townships created under apartheid rule. And it's a jarring sequence of images driving along because you have mounds of rubbish, plastic spread everywhere across trees, across the veldt, and then a gleaming new petrol station. And also bright purple of jacaranda coming into bloom now here in the spring. Milton and I set out on this journey asking if Mandela's promise to make his people the children of paradise had been realized. Now,
I had to be surprised because I'm of course for the opening cell. And Apollinaria sent these deals with the big task of organising information expression, which could have been run into the thousands. To the Imperial Procurator, what your orders, sir, for the ships of the Treasury should be refitted and repaired from Treasury funds to be ready for the auspiciously impending visit of our ruler, the Emperor Diocletian, always victorious. I told the President of the City Council to appoint a surveyor and an overseer of the ships to receive the money from public funds and to account for the expenditure incurred. But he had the nerve to reply that the city did not need to be bothered with this.
It doesn't take much to see that Apollinarius, we'd call him a middle-ranking civil servant, doesn't quite have the powers, the personality, to get the people of his region to
fall into line.
He's a character who reminds me of many administrators that we all come across in our daily lives. He'd been appointed as Strategos quite recently, so he's flexing his muscles, I think, as a recent appointment, trying to exert his authority with the president and the magistrates of the city council. He's under pressure from his superiors to tidy up the mess that had resulted from the revolt. He's very, very quick throughout all of the correspondence to pass blame onto other people for his failure to provide accounts and to provide the information that his superiors are demanding. His life is very, very busy, and no doubt the pressure was there, but he's a very fastidious, a very pedantic kind of character. For example, we see that even in these copies of registers, he's making corrections to the grammatical spelling mistakes that his scribes in the office make. And it sort of reminds me of an academic who, like myself perhaps, who can't resist correcting errors in people's language and people's grammar, missing apostrophes and things like that.
We've all met an Apollinaria. Perhaps some of us can see a little of him in ourselves as we bash out our emails, raging at our own impotence as the bosses above us pile on yet more urgent tasks. His words, though, and the personality that cuts through do give us a rare insight into how the world
Stories of seeing the world differently. In this episode, I explore how a Czechoslovakian folk slid into a Norwegian slip-up, the story of a Cinderella tale from the 1970s and how it's found a special place in the Christmas celebrations of millions of Europeans. On a summer's day in 1974, actor Knut Risan was in the head offices of NRK for a voiceover job. He's a master of the art.
He was one of the first innovative audiobooks. He was one of the most used actors for radio commercials, TV commercials.
And Olaf should know, he's Knut's son.
His voice was heaven sent. He would have that low baritone bass way down in the center. Fantastic voice.
At the NRK office, Knut is approached by a producer who's also well aware of his talent. It's another job opportunity. They've just acquired the distribution rights to a new Cinderella film on the cheap. They want Knut to try dubbing it into the national language from its original.
Somebody had faith in it and thought, this is a good idea. Let's try it on.
It's called Three Nuts for Cinderella. At least that's the English translation. I won't attempt the Norwegian. Olaf can do that for you. Knut's never heard of the film, but he decides to give it a go.
If I close my eyes, I can see him in his little booth with the red light and microphone.
Knut doesn't have time to rehearse, but he really is a natural. He improvises the dialogue lines as he sees the characters appear on his screen.
And somebody laughs, girls, boys,
And the prince, and the king. Knut plays more and more characters and does his best to make each one distinct. presence at all in the film, and this particular Cinderella song is looking in that familiar sugary gloss of Disney's what emerged from post-war America, the one that I think perhaps most people think of when they think about Cinderella. The version connected with us in dubbed Norwegian is a 1973 film from communist Czechoslovakia, directed by Václav Horch. In this version, there's no fairy godmother, no Pumpkin. Instead, the magic that gets Cinderella to the prince comes from 3 hazelnuts, which are given to her as a gift from a friend, one of her stepmother's servants. 3 times she drops them onto the ground, and each time it contains an outfit that gets her into the prince's company. Of course, on one occasion, it takes her into the hall, and this is where she loses her iconic shoe. This Cinderella character has a few other things such as subjects of sleep to catch the prince's attention. The Cinderella we see in this film is not a passive wallflower waiting for a prince to save or rescue her.
No, quite on the contrary. She is very perky, courageous, independent. She would be described as a modern heroine, full of energy and skills and wit.
There are many versions of Cinderella, all of them recognizable as a rags to riches story, usually with a lost shoe. The brothers Grimm are behind one of the most famous variants. For Claudia Schwaber, there's a special connection.
I was born in Hanau, Germany, the same birthplace as the Brothers Grimm, so I always jokingly say the Brothers Grimm and I, we go way back.
I loved the Grimm stories growing up. They're pretty dark at times, but they were magnificently read to me by my mum. Claudia loved them too, and she discovered that she could research them as a career, pretty good job. And she's now a fairy tale and German professor at Utah State University. Claudia knows many, many takes on this familiar tale, and in the 1973 film version, she finds a notably confident Cinderella. Cinderella and the prince are dancing at the ball. He's struck by her beauty, but her face is partly hidden by a veil. He thinks he doesn't recognize her.
On the first marriage request, she doesn't say yes immediately. She says, I might consider it if you solve a riddle for me.
The prince's mind is working overtime, but Cinderella will only accept his proposal after he's solved the riddle.
She's not the type of sweet Disney princess waiting or the damsel in distress. She is very cheeky and she talks back. For example, she wants to prevent the prince from shooting a deer. So she goes ahead and throws a snowball at him. And she steals the horse. So the fact that she pranks the prince and teases him and challenges him, that gives this particular film a very anti-authoritarian twist.
Maybe it's kind of over-interpretation, but some people would like to see her character as the oppressed one, which finds the power inside of her and does her private revolt against the system, against the oppressive stepmother.
Mikhail Bragant is a director of the National Film Archive in Prague. In Czech, the film is called
Tři oříšky pro Popelku, and Popelka, it's a name which was invented for this character because Popel is the ashes connected to the dirty housework from her stepmother, so the name is symbolically humiliating.
The film premiered in Czechoslovakia on November 16, 1973, but screenwriter František Pavlicek's name was nowhere to be found in the credits. Instead, he was replaced by a different name.
Bohumila Zelenková, who was also a screenwriter, and she was a friend of František Pavlicek, so she kind of offered that she would cover with her name this work. It was not very safe
It was considered anti-state activity.
Havlicek has been blacklisted because he was a reformer and public figure during the movement for liberalization in communist Czechoslovakia, which became known as the Prague Spring in 1968 for its blossoming period of greater freedoms.
The intellectuals and the artists tried to change the system in Czechoslovakia and transform into what was the official catchphrase, socialism with human face. And this was the reason why the Soviet Union could not let Czechoslovakia stay on that independent path. They needed to take full control over the country.
In August 1968, Soviet-led forces entered the country.
All reports show the Czechoslovak people are displaying their defiance of Russian invaders.
And Havlicek was amongst those who protested against the invasion. In the early 1970s, in the wake of the invasion, the Soviet Union exerted ever more control over Czechoslovakia. Freedom of speech, artistic expression was severely repressed to maintain ideological control, and the film industry was commandeered by the state.
The cultural landscape of the early 1970s, it was sad, grey, dusty desert.
Producing films for children was easier to get financial support from.
Escapist topics, and a fairy tale is a good thing for an escape from reality.
And so the screenplay, with its true writer hidden, was greenlit for production.
There was nothing political in it at the first sight.
Havlicek based it on a Cinderella variant written in the mid-19th century in Czechoslovakia, and it was a rather conservative tale. Cinderella meets her prince at a church. But scholar Claudia Schwaber thinks that's not what Havlicek wanted to show.
It was him who turned the figure of Cinderella into this very spunky, emancipated, self-confident heroine. And that's why she appears very modern when we watch the film these days.
And it wasn't just the radically different Cinderella as a character that made the film captivating. The score is enchanting.
An absolutely vital part is the music. Romantic and beautiful, but not infantilized. The composer Karel Svoboda said,
Thanks in large part to the funding of their East German partner, the production was able to recruit big names, locations, and resources, but it was down to something as mundane as logistics that Three Nuts started to become a festive ritual.
It takes place during wintertime, which makes this particular Cinderella version a unique adaptation. Before that, there was never a movie made with Cinderella riding through a winter wonderland.
The East German production partner on the film had too many projects on in the summer, so production was postponed to the subsequent winter.
Slippery, and she enters the ball, and you say, what's that? It's so straight. Where is the skirt? And I was really disappointed when I saw it the first time.
The dress was etched into Catherine's memory, and as she grew up, her love for the film grew too.
There were the nice gowns, of course, the lovely music, the whole setting, and there's no other Cinderella actor. I really think it's everything. Everything worked so good together.
So good that Catherine wanted to wear a dress with a straight skirt and a tender ball, just like Cinderella.
I thought, wow, now I am an adult and I can do what I want. I can do it all if I want to. Let's try this.
Now, every year, 50 guests gather for a ball that she puts on at Edith Foster, which also handily was a small castle.
Everybody's dressed up. There are random princes and princesses, and sometimes there's a cowl or a doll. Once, somebody came with his grandmother's curtains around his neck and the Burger King crowd. Great.
There's a film quiz, and then everyone settles down to the main event.
And when the film is over, everybody says, because it's so nice. Cinderella found her prince. the writing of the rice.
哥哥，你想喺嗰度食啊，定係喺架車度食啊？ 咁就好似夠時間可以喺嗰度食。咁喺嗰度食啊 ？OK。
Jump back and forth in the face of each other. It's not a serious reenactment of what we are doing there. It's not about doing the steps absolutely right. It's just about being together and just having fun.
The story of the emancipated Cinderella holds a special place for Catherine, but it has a wider importance too. It subverts the traditional fairy tale genre.
算啦，我都係排即刻會得食嘢。
It's not based on a
隨時可以走。
She deserved her fortune because she'd worked for it. But audiences across Germany and Czechoslovakia in the 1970s also enjoyed the movie for what it was, a fairy tale.
Fairy tales give you a sense of hope and optimism, especially the ones that have happily ever after. They contain communal values and moral messages, and they also deal with issues of justice. They're very important cultural artifacts.
And Mikhail Dragan from the National Film Archive in Prague reminds us of just how significant this film is as a cultural artifact created in 1970s Czechoslovakia.
We can enjoy the movie, but it didn't fall from heavens. I don't want to put the Iron Curtain between Cinderella and the Prince, but myself, I had very ambiguous relationship with the film because I cannot see the film outside the context of involuntarily make agreements between the government and the people. We are going to offer you some fun on television, but you are going to stay loyal. And I hate that in the bottom of my heart. I cannot watch it without some sort of political or historical filter. It's not just a fairy tale. It has a very dramatic context outside of the movie.
But Mikhail agrees with Claudia that there's no denying this particular fairy tale was special.
We could not.
But let's not forget this is fantastic output and news. There's a program. So, and that is what really has to see that coming to as well, knowing that the BBC will be facing squeeze on its finances in the next few years. The government tomorrow probably announce a further squeeze on its finances. There'll be a decision on next year's licence fee. It will go up in inflation, but they'll find a way to make it the lowest possible compared to inflation. At least that's what I understand. So again, that will be tens of millions of pounds cut off for the BBC next year alone, and then we don't know what happens after that. But more importantly, as a long-term funding strategy, at the same time as tomorrow's announcement, we expect the government also to think about different funding models, so not just licensing, but advertising subscription. Fundamental changes to how the BBC is funded, and he will have to head up those negotiations with the government, and to whatever extent he can do, safeguard the BBC's future as an independent, impartial, powerful voice for news and current affairs.
And a lady from years ago, the last BBC chair, Richard Sharp, was seen as very much Boris Johnson's choice, although many think he successfully went out to bat for the BBC, but he had to resign. Samir Shah is going to have to make sure he's clear of the conflict of interest rules. But joking aside, has the government sought a less politicised appointment this time?
Yes, I think absolutely. I mean, considering what happened last time, exactly, Richard Sharp had to resign. He was seen as too close to Boris Johnson. Close enough that he tried to help arrange a loan for him, and that eventually meant that he had to leave his post. The government this time will definitely want a less political, less controversial choice. And in terms of the BBC more broadly, I think we have to consider as well that this will have to be somebody who can continue in that role if Labour wins the next election, expected sometime next year. So, if the government is thinking longer term, they will have that to some degree in mind, as well as not wanting to create another round for this moment.
Okay, and before the programme ends, let's turn to the COVID inquiry. Boris Johnson's been giving evidence today. He's apologised. At one point, he was getting tearful. He says the government didn't at best and no mistakes were made. Elaine, the judge opened today by expressing her concern about some of the contents of Mr Johnson's witness statement being leaked to the papers.
He did, absolutely. So we've seen in recent days a string of stories sort of leading up to Boris Johnson's clearance of the inquiry,
giving information about the arguments that he's going to make, and including some direct quotes from his witness statement. And Boris Johnson's team has been blamed for leaking that to the newspaper in advance to kind of drum up the narrative, set out his case before he actually appears at the inquiry.
Leaking to journalists is something we've got quite used to during COVID and lockdown. There's an irony there, I suppose.
Yes, I think it's a really interesting example because it does show something about the problem with political journalism and other forms of journalism as well. Journalists place opinion scoops, exclusive stories. These can take various forms, and in political journalism, it's often just getting some information about something that's going to happen a little bit later down the line and being the first to publish it. And so any journalist who was offered information about Boris Johnson's witness statement or his argument in advance will have wanted to publish that because they would be first to the story. But that can be a and then therefore that can be used by for example Boris Johnson's team or the government does this, the Labour Party does this to try and shape the narrative in their favour by getting giving what information they want to give out to journalists and getting that right up earlier.
Yeah, we have Matt Hancock's WhatsApps ending up in public after his disagreement with the writer Isabel Oakeshott. WhatsApps have clearly been a feature of this inquiry so far. Has this changed the culture in Westminster? Because I imagine as a lobby journalist, a lot of your business is done by messaging apps. Are your sources in government now far more hesitant about putting interesting quotes in a message?
I wouldn't say that. I think it's continuing to be WhatsApp is the absolute primary mode of communication in Westminster. I speak to MPs, advisors all the time on WhatsApp. What has changed is that people in government are increasingly using the disappearing messages feature, which means that WhatsApp deletes your exchanges after anything between 1 day to 7 days to longer. And that means that information can't later on be retrieved if we had another inquiry into whatever in the future. So I think this inquiry will probably be the last time we have such a trove of information on WhatsApp messages.
And Dan Thomas's briefing for the Financial Times, did your scoop about Sunil Shah, the BBC chair, come on WhatsApp?
Actually, most of it over the old-fashioned method of WhatsApp. Still very much reliable.
Okay, great to know that the old-fashioned elements of journalism are still alive and well. Thank you all so much for coming on the Media Show. I'm afraid we are running out of time. Thank you to Christina Lamb from the Sunday Times, John Dower, whose documentary on Lockerbie is on Sky Documentaries and Now TV, Frank O'Donnell, Daniel Thomas and Eleni Correa. And of course, thank you all so much for listening to the Media Show. We'll be back next week. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The Media Show was presented by Katie Razzle, the producer was Simon Richardson, and the sound engineer was Francis Hicks. There's all of the latest news on the day's events at Code Inquiry again next.
It's a Christmas miracle.
On BBC iPlayer.
This is it. The seasonal.
This is it.
Get the festive checklist ready.
This is the gift of all gifts.
For family times,
Hold on tight.
feel good times, even the source is excited about that. Festive bunnies
That will always give me a Christmas tingle.
and thrilling moments.
What is it? We need to leave now.
Find your festive
Who's it gonna be?
with BBC iPlayer.
On FM, on digital and on BBC Sounds. This is BBC.
It's going to be.
It's 5 o'clock, time for PM with everything.
Hello again. An apology, a little science, some missing WhatsApp messages. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry on his record in charge.
Don't forget that this is a once-in-a-century event. We're doing things, we're enacting policy that has never been enacted in our lifetimes in this country.
We'll hear some of what he had to say today and assess how important his decisions were during the pandemic. In Gaza, some of the most intense fighting yet has been underway. Death is on everybody's mind.
Evan, 1 in 200 Palestinians have been killed in this Israeli assault. So everyone in the Gaza Strip knows someone by name.
The head of the Norwegian Refugee Council, Jan Egeland, says civilian deaths there are a stain on countries backing Israel with arms. He'll join us. Also on PM, a slightly slower hole-in-one. Why golf balls won't be travelling as far as they used to.
The government named TV executive Samir Shah as its preferred candidate. The chair of the BBC, his former colleague Andrew Neil, tells us the challenges he will face. And are restaurant kitchens really as hot as the restaurant kitchen dramas make them out to be?
What you're not capturing is the joy that you get in the kitchen, the days where you are cooking with the most beautiful ingredients.
We'll start. The BBC News, read today by Chris.
Boris Johnson has told the COVID inquiry that the government did its level best during the pandemic, but admitted that he got some key decisions wrong. He apologised for the pain, loss and suffering and said he took personal responsibility. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley reports.
During around 5 hours of evidence, Boris Johnson admitted Whitehall vastly underestimated the risk from COVID and that he should have twigged earlier, in early 2020, about the coming crisis. Mr Johnson was quizzed about the decision-making process in the run-up to the first lockdown. He said significant measures became inevitable a week before, but argued once the government had decided to act, it did so quickly. Questioned about whether the stay-at-home order was absolutely necessary, he said that it was, and that he had given anti-lockdown arguments the short shrift at that stage because his focus had been on saving lives.
Several families who lost relatives in the pandemic said they didn't accept Mr Johnson's apology. Amos Waldman, whose grandmother died from COVID, wanted the former Prime Minister to be more specific.
He said he was going to apologise today, and that apology has been so mean now because we don't know what he's apologising for, and he sort of spreads that and says, well, it's what we got wrong. It's not really an apology as far as I'm concerned. It certainly doesn't excuse the horrendous death toll, which, although he wouldn't accept this morning, the UK has unquestionably had one of the worst death tolls in Europe and the world.
Suella Braverman has called for the government to do more to tackle illegal migration or face electoral oblivion. In her personal statement in the Commons after being sacked last month, she called on MPs to sit through Christmas if necessary to agree new legislation preventing international law blocking the government's plans send asylum seekers to Rwanda.
The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce yet another bill destined to fail. Do we fight for sovereignty, or do we let our party die? Now, I may not have always found the right words in the past, London Speaker, but I refuse to sit by and allow us to fail.
The government says it has signed up to a Hillsborough Charter in response to a report written 6 years ago on the disaster at the Sheffield Wednesday ground, but it stopped short of forcing all public bodies to abide by a legal duty of candour, one of the central recommendations of the report by the former Bishop of Liverpool, James Jones. The Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk, told the Commons the government would make sure there was more legal help for families in the future.
Through the Victims and Prisoners Bill, we have introduced legislation to enable an independent public advocate. The IPA will make sure those affected by major incidents know their rights, can access support services, and have their voices heard in crisis inquiries.
Families who lost relatives in the disaster said the government's moves didn't go far enough. Campaigners have lost their battle to stop the government housing up to 2,000 asylum seekers in the former RAF base at Lincoln. A High Court judge said proposals to use the RAF Scampton airfield were unlawful. West Lindsey District Council, which owns the land, has launched a legal challenge against the plans. Taylor Swift has been named Time magazine's Person of the Year. Singer-songwriter, whose ongoing Eras tour has broken box office records, follows the likes of Barack Obama, Greta Thunberg and Volodymyr Zelensky. She told the magazine that she was the proudest and happiest she'd ever felt. Time magazine published a video in which her fans described what she means to them.
She's been this sort of light in the world this year. She's brought so many people together.
Thank you for writing music that expresses feelings nobody else can express.
It's more of like a community too. It's not even just her. They grew up together. We all went through the same things together.
Fans of Taylor Swift.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Congratulations to her. Well, today was Boris Johnson the reckoning. Former Prime Minister on the stand for the first of his 2 days of testimony about COVID and the government's handling of it. Now, apart from Matt Hancock, He has been the butt of other. No one has been the butt of other witnesses' criticisms as much as he. Charged with not taking COVID seriously enough early on, locking down too late, not being able to stick to a decision, and making inappropriately callous remarks. He also had to explain why several months' worth of WhatsApp messages had gone missing. Well, what did he have to say? We're not going to do justice to the things here. Maybe people don't want to hear much of it all. But here are a few extracts, and we'll start with the apology this morning.
Could I say, by your leave, that I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims and their families.
And you could hear their noises off, the protesters in the stands not really accepting that apology. Now, I suppose the former Prime Minister's central case was that it was just very difficult to make choices if you tried to challenge a removal to Rwanda. So again, that's quite a controversial thing to do. It also says further to that, remember the government has been pushed about the European Convention and the European Court. It doesn't go as far as saying the UK should walk away from all of that, but what it does say is it reaffirms a power that ministers have, which is that if someone is going to be removed, took a case to the European Court, and the court said to the UK, hold on, you've got to look at this case carefully, that the courts should not listen to that interim measure, it's called, from the European Court, but wait for a choice to be the new chairman of the BBC. If approved by MPs on the Culture, Media and Sport Committee, he will replace Richard Sharp, who resigned in April after information emerged about his financial links to Boris Johnson. David Sillito reports. Samir Shah is a former BBC executive who now runs a TV and radio production company. He has sat on boards of a number of organisations. He's also the half-brother of the controller of Radio 4, and he is now, in official terms, the government's preferred candidate for chairman of the BBC. The committee of MPs has to cross-examine him before he's officially installed. He replaces Richard Sharp, a banker who resigned after criticism of his links with Boris Johnson, the loan offered to the former Prime Minister. In contrast, Samir Shah's background is broadcasting rather than politics. With questions looming about the future of the BBC and the licence fee, relations with government will figure highly in the years to come.
How was the lesson?
The technology used in current COVID vaccines can result in what researchers say are harmless errors in how our bodies respond. A team at the University of Cambridge found that genetic instructions in mRNA vaccines, which use groundbreaking technology, can lead to mistakes in how cells read the code, as our medical editor Fergus Walsh explains.
Messenger RNA vaccines were first used during COVID. The revolutionary technology relies on the body reading instructions from the genetic code contained in the vaccine and then producing proteins to which the immune system responds. A study in the journal Nature found errors can occur as cells read the code. This can result in some unintended proteins being produced, as well as those needed to protect against COVID. A study of 21 volunteers found this happen in 1 in 3 people. The researchers say the extra proteins don't cause any physical issues, stressing there was no evidence from billions of doses of mRNA COVID jabs that the transcription errors cause health problems. The scientists have found what they believe is a simple tweak to prevent such errors in future, which may lead to safer medicines. The mRNA approach is also being trialled in cancer, as well as other types of vaccine.
Taylor Swift has been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Her worldwide Eras tour has broken box office records and prompted a US Senate
She's a singer.
Ticketmaster's sales
你記唔記得嗰首歌Shake It Off Shake It Off Shake It Off 嗰首 Shake It Off Shake It Off 佢唱㗎嘛 It's her song.
She told the magazine the award had made her the proudest and happiest she had ever felt. New rules will be introduced to reduce the distance golf balls can fly, because courses are considered to be too short for modern long-range hitting. The regulations will affect players of all standards, professionals to the casual hacker, as our golf correspondent Ian Carter explains.
Modern golf equipment, along with improving fitness and techniques, mean that golf balls are flying further than ever before. Most top stars smash drives in excess of 300 yards, meaning courses frequently need to be extended. This carries unwanted cost and environmental implications. Now the R&A and United States Golf Association, which administer the rules of the game, have decided to act. In just over 4 years, balls for the professional game will have to be composed in such a way as to make them less responsive to big hits. Originally, the rule makers wanted to limit the change to elite players, but this proved unpopular and has been rejected. So, all players eventually, and ball hackers included, will be affected. The R&A's chief executive is Martin Slumbers.
And hundreds, probably thousands of pages and comments, and we have listened to it, reflected it, and this is the decision, and it will be effective from January 2028 with a phased implementation into the recreational games through 2030.
The new rules will mean a reduction in driving distance of around 15 yards for top stars such as Rory McIlroy, while slower swinging recreational players will see a fall of around 5 yards. Former Open champion Padraig Harrington says the changes are proportionate.
It's been watered down a little, to be honest. So we're talking about 10%. 5% is really drawing a line in the sand that we're not letting it go further forward down the road. That's really what the R&A and USGA are doing. Enough is enough. This is the end of it.
The new rules will take full effect at the end of the decade, when current rules will be outlawed. But the leading American circuit, the PGA Tour, has refused to support the move, and at least one manufacturer has described it as disappointing.
The headlines again. Boris Johnson has told the COVID inquiry that he initially underestimated the challenge the virus posed, but he insisted ministers did their level best under the circumstances. The new bill, which aims to enable the government's Rwanda policy to go ahead, will give ministers the power to disregard some human rights law. Fighting has intensified in Gaza, where it says the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the house of a Hamas leader, has been surrounded. Some of the families of those who died in the Hillsborough disaster said the government has missed an opportunity to ensure bereaved relatives are treated better if another large-scale tragedy were to happen. BBC News.
Later this evening, the former editor of The Sun, David Yellen, and Simon Lewis, an ex-troubleshooter for Queen Elizabeth II, will be discussing the unusual change of strategy at Buckingham Palace. That's in response to Emma Scobie's new book about the royal family. When it hits the fan, Buckingham Palace.
What we need is a movie.
Feature-length drama on BBC Radio 4.
I forgot all about this dump while I was thinking the movie. I'd forgotten about it. Why should to go through this now?
The intimate bond between the revolutionary and his son in Buenos Aires prison.
Well, there's another woman. The correct man away. Because I like that.
Manuel Reeves' classic tale of redemptive love. Kerwan and Alfredina.
Tell me, how does the movie end?
Love stories. This and this Spider-Man on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds on Sunday afternoons at 3.
This is Glenn Moore's Almanac, a show all about famous dates in history and what I was doing on those days, starring me, Glenn Moore! Hello, yes, I'm Glenn Moore. Welcome to the show. To tell you a bit about myself, I'm fascinated by dates in history. Take any moment, any day that's ever happened, you can guarantee something amazing will take place. I've got my big book of dates here, so you can take any day at random. Let's do, December 31st. So much has happened. You can pick any 31st of December in history. There's always been a major event. 2003, for instance, it was New Year's Eve. 1648, New Year's Eve as well. I could go on, and I will. 1952, it was New Year's Eve. 1977, Ted Bundy escaped from prison, terrifying. I was so scared of Ted Bundy as a kid, because I used to do that challenge, the urban legend challenge, in front of the mirror, the Ted Bundy thing. Anyone ever do that? It's an urban legend, probably not true, but apparently, if you stand in front of your mirror at midnight and you loudly say Ted Bundy 5 times, apparently your mum comes in and goes, what are you doing? Now I want to talk to you about December 31st, 1999, the millennium, the big one, the one from the Prince song. Why was it important to me
What was I doing on that day? Well, like many people, I was going to a New Year's Eve party. It was my first ever late night party. Bear in mind, in 1999, I was still in primary school. I was your average kid. The only unique thing about me was I was the only Glenn in my school. It's not a weird name, but Glenn isn't that much of a common name. So is this weird? About 10 years ago, I went out with a girl, and her previous boyfriend before me was also called Glenn. Is that weird? Is that weird? We kind of broke up over it. Yeah, she kept calling out his name in bed. Not for me. The childhood was fine. I grew up in Croydon. It was pretty tough, but my parents were loving. I always had a very loving relationship with my parents. I first realised that when I was at boarding school. But I'm not going to lie, it was a bit of a tough area. We had really rough neighbours. They were just covered head to toe in scary tattoos. My next door neighbour had these knuckle tattoos that said hate and inbreeding. I gotta say, I actually like knuckle tattoos that you can read, because I used to live, this is true, I used to live with a guy at uni who had these knuckle tattoos that said love is pain, which sounds really cool, but it meant on his right hand it just said Spain. So in a tough place like Croydon, you had to be tough, you had to be brutal. That's how I've always had to be. It stayed with me into adulthood. That's me now, like whenever I get a bad haircut, and I don't like the haircut, I've now finally got the guts to be able to look that hairdresser dead in the eye and say, that's great, thank you. I'm not afraid. Now, too many occasions in my life I've been scared to speak up, frightened to speak my mind. Too many occasions in my life have I sat in the back seat of a cab with no idea where the seatbelt was meant to click in, and I've been too frightened to say to the cab driver, please help me. Instead of speaking up, I've just done that thing that you've all done at some point in your life. I just sit there and silently and shamefully hold the seatbelt across my body. Because that's the same, isn't it? We all know that if you got involved in a serious car accident, all that the laws of physics cares about is whether or not it looked a bit like you were wearing a seatbelt. So New Year's Eve 1999, big day for a lot of people. There's pressure to do stuff on New Year's Eve, making New Year's resolutions and sticking to them. I've only ever failed New Year's resolutions before, just like everyone else. Be cheery, failed New Year's resolution before. You have, you sir, what was the last New Year's resolution you failed? Mine was to stop talking over people. It's hard. It's very difficult. There's pressure on New Year's Eve to go to parties. There's pressure to do something exciting, even if it isn't going to a party. Like on New Year's Eve, Donald Trump had a baby. 1977, Donald Trump Jr. was born on the 31st of December, a day synonymous with complete failure and wasted potential. You've got to do something on New Year's Eve. Like once on the 31st of December, my dad went to visit an indie cinema where every year they do like a James Bond movie marathon. They play every James Bond movie back to back. If I watched the entire thing without me, my dad actually managed it, which is incredible. Obviously, this is back in the 60s, so they just showed Dr. No. But this New Year's Eve was nerve-wracking because of worries about Y2K. And computers weren't programmed to understand the year 2000. They looked great light, the sky above and the threat of Y2K was bigger than my dad. My dad was a real conspiracy theorist. My dad's a proper extreme conspiracy theorist. He's a flat mooner.
Flat mooner.
The moon landing was fake, but Wallace and Gromit's A Grand Day Out was real. I can't understand that. So we were going to this family friend's Y2K party. It was a family that my parents barely knew. The dad worked in computers. My dad had big Y2K flash. This household was a family of real nerdy open. The dad was a real tech genius. Years ago, he invented the world's most advanced computer calculator. I did actually hold it upside down and spell mammary. They had a son called Bernard who went to my school. I hated him. Still do. I hate Bernard. He's the kind of person who claps at the time, man. Now, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. No, I've got nothing wrong with that. But it was an issue once we got as a French exchange at school. As soon as the plane landed, everyone was like clapping and cheering. Bernard started whooping and clapping and cheering so enthusiastically. He called out encore. We flew back to England again. You can understand I did not want to hang out with these people. My parents, though, they wanted to be better friends with these people. Generations after generations like that. Bernard's grandpa had invented his green map, so that every time you cross the road, he gets a quid. My family resented that, so what we do is we'd only ever cross the road whenever it was a red map. And guess what his grandma invented? Yep, ambulances. But I was told that if I behaved myself in this party, I was nice to know that New Year's Day would go to people. I love it. I've always loved it. Some people say I take mini golf too seriously, but I can't disagree. I was obsessed with mini golf. Ungrateful for mini golf. Ungrateful that the toilets at mini golf aren't like the rest of mini golf. You know, I'm grateful I don't have to pee through a windmill or defecate into a clown's mouth. But first, I had to get to this party, and it was going to be hard. I was 10. I was too shy to talk to girls. I was always too shy to talk to girls. I was terrified of girls. But then, the moment I hit puberty, I think that is eventually going to change. I used to get so nervous at parties. I was already a very neurotic kid. My parents had to get me a therapy out when I was growing up. The NHS was obviously very strapped for cash, so they got me a therapy once. If ever I was feeling nervous, they'd lock me in a small room and let in Helen. I was so neurotic, I would prepare for parties in my head. Before I went to a party, I'd think out all the different conversational topics I might have and how those conversations would go. I don't think I'm alone in doing that, right? Do you ever have full-blown conversations with yourself? Sorry, I was talking to me. And the night before the party, I was scared. I couldn't sleep. I was scared about the party. I was scared of the dark, very neurotic. I was scared of stuff that comes out in the dark, like spiders and creepy crawlies. And then you start to get even more worried. You start to combine spiders and the dark. You start to get those horrifying urban legend statistics. You know, like how in London you're never more than 6 feet away from becoming a spider? I hate stats like that. Or that terrifying one, that stat that the average human eats 8 spiders in their sleep every year. That stat is terrifying for humans. Pretty embarrassing for spiders. If you got eaten by an unconscious person who specifically did not want to eat spiders, that's embarrassing. I don't even know how they came up with that statistic. I think there were 2 scientists, one normal one and one weird one. And the normal scientist said, I've eaten no spiders this year, which is already a weird thing to say. But then the weird one said, well, I've eaten 16, and they've gone, well, obviously the average there is 8. It actually makes me less scared of spiders, that stat. My friends will say things like, Glenn, that spider in the corner of the room, don't worry, it's more scared of you than you are of it. It's like, of course it is. I ate its parents, I wasn't even trying. But let me tell you, there's nothing worse, isn't there, when it gets to New Year's Eve, and you suddenly realise you haven't eaten 8 spiders in your sleep all year. And you've got to go to bed on New Year's Eve thinking, well, tonight's the night. Do you know what I do? I get it out of the way early. New Year's Day, New Year, new me. I line up 8 spiders just down to more shots to kill and get out of the way. So I wake up 31st of December 1999. It was an unseasonably very sunny day, very warm day. You could see all the marigolds in bloom and all the Jeff Golds in bloom. As soon as it got dark around 5 o'clock, we started making our way to the party. I was dreading just how far away from midnight we were. We were going to have to be at this.
Well, they finally see
Great, looking back. You know, a lot of people don't actually get to see New Year's. But Rasputin, for instance, he died on the 30th, which is remarkable because they actually started killing him on the 17th. So the actual date of his death is widely disputed. There was nothing at this party to keep my interest. I already wasn't into parties. I wasn't hugely into music at the time. I had favourite songs, of course.